Good evening and welcome to TVB News. The dueling blockades in the Strait of Hormuz lurched into uncharted waters today. This as the U.S. pressed ahead with its campaign to choke off Iranian ports, and Iran reversed an initial move to reopen the waterway. General tells us more.
Iran's Joint Military Command said control of the Strait of Hormuz has returned to its previous state under strict management and control of the armed forces. It warned it would continue to block transit through the strait as long as the U.S. blockade of Iranian ports remained in effect. The shift came a day after Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi declared the strait open while a 10-day truce was announced between Israel and the Iranian-backed Hezbollah militant group in Lebanon. Control over the strait has proven to be one of Iran's main points of leverage and prompted the U.S. to deploy forces and initiate a blockade of Iranian ports as part of an effort to force Iran to accept a Pakistan-brokered ceasefire to end almost 7 weeks of war that has raged between Israel, the U.S. and Iran. A data firm Kipler said movement through the strait remained confined to corridors requiring Iran's approval. General TV News.
U.S. President Donald Trump touted positive news in negotiations with Iran, despite questions remaining over the Strait of Hormuz. Meanwhile, Trump denied media reports U.S. officials were preparing to unfreeze $20 billion of Iranian funds as part of a 3-page draft ceasefire memorandum currently under negotiation between the two sides. Here's General again.
U.S. President Donald Trump said he might not extend a ceasefire with Iran if there's no peace deal brokered when it expires next week. Trump said, "Maybe I won't extend it, so you'll have a blockade and unfortunately we'll have to start dropping bombs again." However, Trump also told reporters a lot of good things are happening as the talks continue over ending the conflict in Iran.
So we're having a big day. We'll see how it all turns out, but it should be good. We've had some very good discussions, and hopefully that subject that you like to talk about will be very good. And we've done a good job, but we'll see. Talks are going on. It'll go on over the weekend, and a lot of good things are happening.
Meanwhile, media reports said U.S. officials were preparing to unfreeze $20 billion of Iranian funds as part of a 3-page draft ceasefire memorandum currently under negotiation between the two sides. U.S. President Trump denied the reports. In a post on Truth Social, he claimed the U.S. would obtain all of Iran's enriched uranium, which he referred to as nuclear dust created by U.S. B-2 bombers, without making any payment. Meanwhile, Iranian Foreign Ministry spokesman Esmail Bagay said Iran rejects any plan to ship its enriched uranium abroad. He said compensation for damage inflicted on Iran remains a critical issue in the talks, and there is no ambiguity left regarding the matters under negotiation. General TV News.
Lebanese President Joseph Aoun said in a national address that Lebanon is moving from ceasefire implementation efforts towards securing long-term stability. This as Lebanese and Israeli leaders agreed on a ceasefire deal that doesn't include Iran-backed Hezbollah. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said his country is not yet finished with Hezbollah. Danny Zhou tells us more details.
The truce between Israel and Lebanon seemed to be holding early Friday. Northern Israeli residents living near the border noted that the serious suffering brought by the fighting needs to stop. While some assume everything might turn back at some point since no arrangement has been made with Hezbollah, some others expressed their strong yearning for peace, saying they want the war to end once and for all. Lebanese President Joseph Aoun said he wants his country to chart its own course, emphasizing these negotiations are not weakness, nor retreat, nor surrender. He has also outlined main objectives, including halting Israeli attacks, ensuring withdrawal of their troops, and securing the return of prisoners. U.S. President Donald Trump has invited Aoun and Netanyahu to the White House, although no date has been set yet. U.S. Ambassador to Turkey Tom Barrack acknowledged the ceasefire was delicate and a start, as everybody's been equally untrustworthy.
Look, I think the brilliance of what happened yesterday is it stopped senseless killing. And President Trump and Secretary Rubio stepping in strongly with Israel and saying we need a timeout. So will the ceasefire stick? What will we do? It's baby steps. Everybody's rushing to fill in those pieces. We see what didn't work in that 2024. Remember, we still have a mechanism and a pentalateral in effect. We have a whole organization that responds to requests for action from either side. It's trust building, and it's the first step of trust building.
Lebanon's health ministry reported the death toll from the war reached 2,294 people between March the 2nd and Thursday. In Nabatea, 3 Israeli drone strikes on teams of ambulances reportedly claimed the lives of 4 paramedics and wounded 6 others earlier this week. The strikes have drawn condemnation from the United Nations Human Rights Office, which warned intentionally targeting medics constituted a war crime. After the US broke a 10-day ceasefire to hold on Friday, thousands are traveling for kilometers on a route to evacuated villages in southern Lebanon on vehicles piled high with salvaged belongings. Many returnees found their communities demolished. Nevertheless, the scale of destruction do not change their feelings about their home. Danny Zhou, TVB News.
Even as the government encourages local taxis to go electric, the number of such vehicles on the road remain low. Many cab drivers say the lack of enough fast-charging points put them off. Some industry players are calling for a shift to battery swapping, hoping to encourage more taxi drivers to switch to electric vehicles. Samantha Lee has more.
Have you ever seen or caught an electric taxi? There are a total of 17,000 licensed taxis in Hong Kong, and fewer than 1,200 are electric. In other words, only 1 in every 15 taxis or so are electric. Chow Kwok Keung, chairman of the Hong Kong Taxi and Public Light Bus Association, pointed out that many taxi drivers are still reluctant to switch, even though the conflict in the Middle East has caused LPG prices to soar.
One
of the reasons, he said, is that most of the fast charging facilities are not in urban areas. Since many drivers rent their taxis, spending time to charge means earning less. To address the issue, a new energy group partnered with the mainland car brand Hongqi to introduce the first battery swapping taxi in Hong Kong. No real waiting and queuing here, simply changing out depleted batteries for fresh, recharged ones. Tommy Yip, managing director of the energy company, said battery swapping have some big advantages, with the most obvious being far less time to swap a battery when compared to recharging a battery. He said swapping takes only 90 seconds, while charging takes at least 15 to 20 minutes. Drivers can make use of the time for more orders. The group is going to set up at least 14 battery swap stations, but only the Fanning and Qingyu ones are ready. The others are stuck at the planning stages. Jeffrey Zhang, also a managing director of the energy company, said, "We have considered many locations, but due to land use planning restrictions, it may not be easy to build swap stations." Meanwhile, the government aims to have 3,000 electric taxis next year. It stated that it has established an interdepartmental working group to update guidelines for the charging facilities within this year and assist operators in advancing projects as quickly as possible. Samantha Lee, TVB News.
The police identified a new type of scam involving residents receiving suspected bogus government mail displaying suspicious QR codes. Authorities reminded the public not to scan such codes with an unknown origin. A number of payment platforms these days utilize QR codes, with the digital system having become part and parcel of life in the community. But many might be unaware of the codes being used in the city's latest scams. The police noted on social media that there have been recent reports of residents in Mong Kok receiving suspicious mail from a so-called prosecution department. Documents inside the mail would include displays such as absolutely confidential, QR codes, as well as stamps similar to those issued by the Hong Kong Post. The police reminded residents that authorities usually do not require citizens to provide sensitive information via scanning QR codes on government mail. They added that those who have received suspicious legal documents should first make inquiries through government websites. The police further urged residents to increase their awareness when scanning QR codes, especially those with an unknown origin, in hopes of avoiding the installation of malware in their devices. Speaking on the increasing prominence of QR codes being used in scams, computer security expert Anthony Lai said there have been cases of fraudsters sending bogus payment notices to residents, displaying such codes or URLs, leading citizens to make payments on fake government websites. He stressed the cost for scammers to design a QR code is extremely low, emphasizing that the risk of residents scanning the codes could result in the leakage of sensitive data such as credit card information as well as the person's residential address. Welcome back. The second day of the Rugby Sevens continued to attract large crowds of fans. A legislative council member suggested merchants in neighboring districts to offer discounts to spectators in order to boost consumer spending. Rachel Ng was there.
On the second day of the tournament, tens of thousands of fans were in high spirits within the main stadium of Kai Tak Sports Park. Strong rhythms and music, accompanied by sunshine, had the entire crowd singing and dancing. This astronaut returned to Earth, and even people from the Stone Age, along with Julius Caesar, were among the spectators.
As long as you're in the south stand, atmosphere is great and better than every other stand, by the way.
Fans had almost packed the south stand to capacity, and crowd control measures were implemented from midday onwards. This lifeguard switched the venues to help maintain order. They tried a new trick in the boat to stand out in the sea of people. Taiwan tourist Mr. Gu, attending the match for the first time, enjoyed the atmosphere and thought everyone was very enthusiastic. He's already looking forward to the next match.
It's a Rugby Sevens tradition for the loudest fans to gather at the south stand to watch the matches. Performances are often held there, making the atmosphere particularly electric, and this year is no exception.
Driven by last year's Rugby Sevens, businesses in the Kowloon City district saw an overall increase of 15% in sales. Legislative Council member Vincent Zhang suggested that merchants should offer discounts to tourists who present their ticket stubs to further stimulate consumer spending. He believes those knowing they could acquire discounts would proactively visit those restaurants. And if more catering businesses could join in such cross-promotions, the results would be even better. He suggests the government take the initiative through the tourism board or other departments to facilitate collaboration and encourage more restaurants to promote this offer. Rachel Ng, TVB News.
A video of a worker suspected of smoking at a construction site before being told to leave the area has gone viral online. Smoking regulations in construction sites have significantly tightened after the Whampoa Court fire last year. But some workers' unions said certain cases of such offenses may be unavoidable. A video posted online has gone viral showing a worker suspected of being caught smoking at a construction site at an unknown date. The footage also showed what is believed to be the cigarette thrown away by the worker in its lunchbox. He was subsequently told by the suspected foreman of the construction site to collect his belongings and leave the area, with the latter stressing that he will notify the worker's employer. Some in the construction sector said smoking regulations in construction sites have strengthened since the Whampoa Court fire, cases of such offenses having greatly reduced since then. Chelsea Kidd, the chairman of the Hong Kong Construction Industry Employees General Union, said workers found to have committed smoking offenses at such sites will be fined $5,000 or face immediate dismissal. He added that most construction sites today require workers to place their cigarette packs in lockers located outside of the site itself. Authorities are currently amending legislation requiring a blanket ban on smoking in construction sites, with the proposal calling for contractors who fail to implement the ban to face a maximum fine of $400,000. This as Chow stressed challenges remain for a full-scale implementation of the measure, noting that many construction site supervisors are not allowed to search workers who may secretly sneak cigarettes onto sites. He emphasized that workers themselves need to take into consideration their actions having an impact on their careers, as most contractors are unlikely to hire those who have been fired for committing smoking offenses. Secretary for Commerce and Economic Development Algernon Yao said the troubles in the Middle East has a limited impact on Hong Kong's economy, as it currently accounts for only 1.5% of Hong Kong's total trade volume. In the future, he said the government will expand trade networks in Central Asia, Eastern Europe, and Northern Africa to drive Hong Kong's economic growth. Samantha Lee has more.
Amid instability in the Middle East, Secretary for Commerce and Economic Development Algernon Yao said the geopolitical conflict has only affected Hong Kong's trade to a limited extent. Speaking on a radio program, Yao remains confident about long-term business ties with the Middle East, pledging that the government will explore all possible ways to lure funds and capital from the Middle East into Hong Kong. He said Hong Kong has strengths in many areas, including green finance, innovation and technology, areas where the Middle East has development needs. Meanwhile, once geopolitical stability returns, he said the government will go out and explore opportunities in Central Asia, Eastern Europe and Northern Africa. For now, the war has disrupted air travel around the world and driven up fuel costs. Regarding the decision by some airlines to adjust flights to the Middle East, Yao said it is reasonable, noting that there are still other flight routes to the region and that the impact will not be too profound. Samantha Lee, TVB News.
Teams attending the 2026 humanoid robot half marathon are racing to fine-tune the details before hitting the course on Sunday. This year's event will see a record of 112 teams taking part, including 5 international teams from Germany, France, and Brazil. One participant is impressed with what he has seen.
Really impressive. When I see what they done, like the first marathon that happened last year, and what we saw like this year, I'm impressed by the advancements that have been made. Like last year, some robots had like some hard time to just stay standing, but now this year, almost every robot is able to stand, and they all focus on performances, and that's very exciting.
The 21-kilometer races cover more than 10 types of terrain, including flat ground, slopes, curves, and narrow sections. There are even several near 90-degree curves, providing complex environment for robots to test their adaptation and decision-making capabilities. In the U.S., a Utah judge is weighing a request from the accused killer of Turning Point USA co-founder Charlie Kirk to bar live broadcasts and cameras from the courtroom on grounds they violated his right to a fair trial. The suspect faces the death penalty after allegedly shooting Kirk in the neck in front of thousands at a college rally last September. Danny Zhou has the report.
Tyler Robinson, the man suspected of killing conservative activist Charlie Kirk, was back in a Utah court Friday afternoon for an evidentiary hearing. Robinson's defense team continued their push to exclude media cameras from the courtroom, pointing to sometimes sensational and slanted media coverage that they fear could prejudice the jury pool. Prosecutors and Kirk's widow, Erica, however, want cameras allowed. They argued it would be the best way to make the progress transparent and dispel conspiracy theories. Pool cameras were stationed at the rear of the courtroom behind Robinson in recent hearings and on Friday. The 23-year-old hasn't entered a plea yet, and a trial date has not been set. Authorities say they found DNA consistent with Robinson's on the trigger of the rifle and the fired cartridge casing. The preliminary hearing was scheduled for mid-May, where prosecutors must establish probable cause or show enough evidence to proceed the trial. The defense has asked for a 4-month delay, saying it had not received DNA data files it needed for expert witnesses.
We can't present any expert testimony on DNA without having the underlying data.
Prosecutors responded that DNA files were not necessary to establish probable cause.
The point is that there is substantial evidence of probable cause, far exceeding what probable cause requires. And it comes from a variety of sources.
McBride said the evidence he plans to present include Robinson's confessions, handwritten note, as well as video surveillance and physical evidence linking him to the shooting. The judge will rule on whether or not to postpone the preliminary hearing at a later date. Danny Zhou, TVB News.
Pope Leo XIV held Mass in Cameroon's capital, Yaoundé, just before he flies off to his next stop, Angola. President Paul Biya were among those who attended as the pontiff blessed the crowd. It followed another Mass on Friday, where the Pope urged the youth of the Central African country to resist temptation to migrate and instead work for the common good at home. Catholics represent about 29% of Cameroon's population, and the country is a major source of growth and priestly vocations for the church. And that's the news. Thanks for watching.